Hello everyone, myself Purushotham, working as Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering, MLR. In this session, I am going to discuss about the constructor concept. So, this is the today's overview. First, I will discuss the constructor, then after I will discuss the types of constructor and some sample examples I will discuss. So, let us get started today's session. So, what is a constructor? A constructor is a special method, and it is used to initialize the object. So, why it is a special method means the constructor and class name, the constructor name and class name must be same. So, that is why it is a special, and it is a special method because it is not having any return type. Okay, so these are the reasons why the constructor method is a special method, and it is used to initialize the object. So, why the constructor means the constructor, the main intention of using the constructor is to initialize the object, means whenever you are creating object. So, during the object creation, so this constructor will be called. So, if you want to initialize the object, the constructor is a mandatory. So, what is the importance of constructor means it is used to initialize the object, and when the constructor will be called, when the constructor will be invoked means while object creation, so the constructor will be called. So, suppose if you take an example, see here. So, here I have a class, the class name is a test. So, if you want to create a constructor, so here as I mentioned, the constructor is a special method. So, method means compulsory, params is the mandatory, the params is there, and whatever the class name is there, the same class name here you need to take. So, here the class name is a test, and here also you need to take the test. Exactly whatever the name here is there, and same we need to take here. So, it is a constructor. As I mentioned, the constructor is used to initialize the object. So, object data means what? Instance data, instance variable. So, here A is an instance variable. Now, A I want to initialize. So, the best recommended area of initialization of instance variable is what? Inside constructor. So, here A is an instance variable and that variable I want to initialize here. So, here I initialize. The main intention of using a constructor is used to initialize the object. So, here I initialized. So, constructor rules. So, here while defining the constructor, we need to follow some rules. As I mentioned, the constructor name is a special method. So, here whatever the class name here you are taking, the same class name we need to take here. So, that is the first rule of the constructor. And as I mentioned, it is a special method, it is a method, but it does not have any return type. So, the return type concept is not applicable for the constructor. So, even if you write a void also, it is not a constructor. Okay, if you write a void, what will happen means, if any constructor, see here the next point, if any constructor with a return type, okay, even if it is a void, it will not treat it as a constructor and it will call just like a normal method call. And so, next point, the constructor legal modifiers. So, here the legal modifier apart from default, you can use a public, you can use a private, you can use a protected. So, if you are using other than any modifiers, it will throw error. So, compulsory we need to use either default modifier or you can use a public or private or protected. Next, so types of the constructor. So, constructors can be divided into three types. So, one is the default constructor, second one is a non-parameterized constructor, and third one is the parameterized constructor. Okay. Now, we will see what is the default constructor. So, as I mentioned, a default constructor. The default constructor means it is a constructor. Suppose if you are not to define any constructor in your program, so automatically the compiler automatically it will add a default constructor to your program. Okay, so that is a default constructor. So, for every class in Java, the constructor concept is applicable even if it is abstract class also. Okay. So, for abstract class instantiation, object creation is not possible, even though, so constructor concept is applicable. Okay. So, why the constructor concept is applicable for abstract class and object creation is not possible, but constructor concept is applicable. So, this point we will see coming sessions. Okay. So, as of now, the point is what? Here every class in Java, the constructor concept is applicable even if it is abstract class also. For abstract class also the constructor concept is applicable here. Next, the default constructor does not contain any parameters. As I mentioned here, it is a default constructor. It is a default constructor. Default constructor means if the class does not have any constructor, if you are not added any constructor to your program, So automatically compiler, automatically it will add the constructor, and this constructor doesn't have any parameters. Next, so if you are not to define any constructor, the compiler automatically generate the default constructor. As I mentioned, the default means we no need to add the constructor. If you are not add the constructor, the compiler is the responsible, and the compiler automatically it will generate a default constructor here. But if you define one constructor in your class and the compiler won't generate the default constructor. Okay, so suppose if you take an example here, assume here I have a class and a class name is a test. So assume here you are not defined any constructor in your program. Now what will happen means, so this will be invisible and this will be added by the compiler. So it is a default constructor, and the default constructor is having only one statement here, that is a super method. Okay, so here the default constructor has having only one single statement, that is a super method, and this default constructor will be added by the compiler. Okay, so compiler is responsible for this, and this part is an invisible part. And the default constructor doesn't have any parameters in it. So that is what the default constructor. So coming to the parameterized constructor. The parameterized constructor means if a constructor doesn't accept any parameters, then it is known as no argument or non-parameterized constructor. Means, so suppose assume here I have a class and here I created a constructor, and this part is a constructor. So this constructor doesn't accepting any parameters here. So it is a non-parameterized constructor or no argument constructor. So this is a sample example for non-parameterized or zero argument constructor. So here I have a class, the class name is a student, and here I created a constructor, and the constructor is not accepting any parameter. So it is a no argument or zero argument constructor. So as I mentioned, whenever you are creating object to the class, see here I created object to the class name is a student, I created object to the class, and whenever you are creating object to the class, now the constructor, this part is a constructor, so here you are calling a constructor. You are calling constructor here. So here you are not passing anything. So it is, this class is having only one constructor, that is what zero argument constructor. Here also you are not passing anything. So this part will be called. Okay, while object creation itself, automatically the constructor will be called. So here inside a constructor, here I mentioned a point, like this student constructor is calling. So here output will be the student constructor is a calling will be print automatically. Okay, so if you want, you can see here the same point I will explain. The programmatically, you can see here I have a class. So class, and I want to create a constructor. So here I am creating a constructor. So constructor and zero argument constructor. So in zero argument constructor, I want to print something, some data like student constructor is calling. Student constructor is calling. Now I will create student s equals to new student. Now I created object here. So during object creation, so your constructor will be called. You can see here. So it is a printing a constructor, student constructor is a calling. So when it is a calling means while object creation itself, so your constructor method will be called. It is a zero argument constructor. So default constructor means if you are not adding any constructor here, automatically a default constructor will be executed. So the default constructor doesn't have any statement. So if you run this program, it doesn't print anything. But defaultly, whenever you are compiling your program, the compiler automatically it will add the default constructor, and it is invisible for us. So next constructor, the parameterized constructor. The next constructor, the parameterized constructor. So as name suggests, a constructor, if it has parameters, is known as a parameterized constructor. Means if any constructor, if it is accepting one or more parameters, then it is called the parameterized constructor. So if you want to initialize the fields of the class with your own values, then use the parameterized constructor. Means suppose in your class if you have what instance variables, okay, and if you want to initialize the instance variables, the best recommended and best practice area is a constructor. So inside a constructor you need to initialize instance variable. So if you want to initialize the instance variable with your own values, so you need to use the constructor. So the constructor, which type of constructor we need to use means the parameterized constructor we need to use. So in the class it is possible to provide any number of constructors, means the constructor overloading, any number of constructors we can use in our class, means this concept is called constructor overloading. Constructor overloading. So overloading constructor is possible, means any number of constructor you can write in your class. So that is possible. So that point also we will see now. Okay. So these points now we will see the programmatically now. So here as I mentioned, the parameterized constructor is used to initialize instance variables. So here I will take instance variables. So student class and contain some attributes like name, and here I will take integer id. So here I will take a constructor here, string name. Now this name I want to initialize here, so name equals to name. Now you can see this is the instance variable. Now this instance variable name I want to initialize. So where we need to initialize means inside a constructor we need to initialize. So here I am taking the name, and the name I want to initialize. So here also I am taking the name. So my intention is I want to initialize the instance variable and the parameter name is the same here. So that's why I am using this here. Okay. So if you want you can take the different name. So suppose here if you want you can take capital N, and without using this also we can write. Now here I initialize. Now whenever you are creating object, what will happen means it will call a constructor. The constructor is accepting a parameter that is a string type. So here I will pass any name, like I will pass Ram. Now the Ram will be initialized here. So if you want you can print that details. So public void print details. So here I am taking a method, and this method is used to print the details of the students. Student name I want to print, name I want to print. Now I want to print this student details, print details. Now here you can see, so whenever you are calling the constructor and the constructor is accepting one parameter, I passed one parameter here. So this constructor will be called and this value will get initialized, this name get initialized here. Now I want to print the details, the print name of the student. So here it will print name equal name colon Ramu, it will print. See here the name colon Ram. So how it is initializing? So here in main method itself you are passing a Ram, and while creating object you are passing the Ram. That Ram here is initialized. Okay, so here is initializing. Okay, so whenever you are printing the printed details and it is same, it is a printing name Ram. So it is possible to declare any number of constructors in your program. So here I mentioned only one constructor. So it is possible to declare any number of constructors in your class. So there is no restriction at all. So this concept is called constructor overloading. Means rewriting the constructor with a different method signatures is nothing but the constructor overloading. So here I will take one more constructor. Here I will take a constructor. So now id and id I want to initialize. Now here id and id both are same. So you need to use this keyword. So this dot id equals to id. So if you are confusing this, so change this name. So here I will take capital I. So here also I will change id. Now I want to print the details. I want to print the details like name and ID I want, and here I will print ID. Now, so whenever you are calling, see here the two constructors are there, first constructor and second constructor. Now, if you are passing only one argument means here the two constructor anyhow there, so first constructor will be trigger. Why means here you are passing only one argument. And suppose if you are passing the two arguments, and the two arguments, suppose if you are passing 1, 2, 3. Now you can see here the RAM is a string type, and this one, and integer 1, 2, 3 is an integer type, and this part means this constructor will be trigger and these two values will be get initialized. Now whenever you are calling the print details method, so automatically it will print the name is RAM and ID is a 1, 2, 3. So if you run this one, it will print the same. You can see here. See here, name is a printing RAM and ID is printing 1, 2, 3. Means you can create any number of constructors in your class. So this concept is called the constructor overloading. So rewriting the constructor with a different method signatures with this rewriting the constructor with a different method signature is nothing but the constructor overloading. And when the constructor will be called means, so during object creation itself the constructor method will be called. Okay, so that's about the constructor concept. Thank you.